Oh, welcome everyone. I'm Sue Glaser, statewide educational specialist with Florida Instructional Material Center for the Visually Impaired. And we're very excited to present to you today Sound Travels, collaboration of audiology, orientation and mobility, and the special education team, presented by Chris Tabb and Kaycee Bennett. Thank you everyone for joining us, and especially Chris and Kaycee for taking the time to do your presentation for Florida. To view closed captions, you want to select the live transcript button on your Zoom menu bar. Captions will appear along the bottom of your screen. To use the text chat, open the chat panel and remember to choose everyone from the drop-down that above the text entry field. Otherwise, the auto select may be just the host or just the panelists. So, so that everyone can see your messages, choose everyone. And then the link to the recording will be posted on our past events webpage under the expanded core curriculum, orientation and mobility section. The website is www.fimc-VI.org/OM-RECLESIURE. And in-service credit information. In-service and ACV REP credit are available, and you will need the magic code. How to obtain credit will be explained at the end of the webinar. Andrea is going to put in the opening code in the chat box. I believe it's collaboration or collaborate. Opening code is collaborate, and then at the end of the session, we will give you the closing code and explain how to obtain credit. So this afternoon, April 14th, 2022, we're going to do our welcome and introductions, then look at Sound Travels with Chris and Kaycee. And then about 2:55, we'll wrap up to go over the evaluation and in-service credit. And then at 3 o'clock, anyone that wants to stay on, we're going to have our optional O&M virtual water cooler. So that's an opportunity for folks to just ask questions, bounce ideas off one another, just have some discussion and talk to fellow O&M instructors that you probably don't see very often. And at 3:30, we will adjourn. But the workshop for credit will be complete at 3 o'clock and we'll stop the recording. So the optional virtual water coolers, if you want to stick around and have some questions or just hear what people are saying. Our webinar objectives today, participants will explore tools for facilitating collaboration on students' needs when communicating with audiologists, the perspective, reports, and some of the interventions from the audiological field, and we'll explore the unique sensory and evaluation needs for students who have dual sensory loss. Our presenters. Get into the good stuff. Chris Tabb is an orientation and mobility specialist working to advance the independence of students and clients, providing training opportunities and knowledge exchange for professionals and families, and bring accessible information to the community. He is presently employed at Texas School for the Blind and Visually Impaired, TSB-VI, outreach programs as statewide orientation and mobility specialist. Thank you, Chris, for being here. And Kaycee Bennett joined the Texas Deafblind Project in 2019 after working with school districts in the North Texas area as an auditory impairment specialist and then a teacher of students who are deafblind. Her passion is creating better programming, access, and communication for students across the state of Texas and the staff supporting them. Kaycee is a certified teacher of students who are deaf or hard of hearing and has a graduate certificate and master's degree in deafblind education from Texas Tech University. So thank you, Kaycee, for joining us as well. It looks like we've got the best of both worlds today. This is awesome. And now I'm going to allow our presenters to share your presentation and take it away. If anyone has any questions throughout, you can go ahead and put those in the chat box. I'll be monitoring that. And like Andrea had mentioned earlier, keep your microphone on mute just so that others can better pay attention and hear what's going on. All right, here you go, Chris and Kaycee.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. And now that we were just told to mute our mics, I'm going to throw a monkey wrench in. If somebody has questions, please feel free to contribute in the chat if you would prefer to use your voice to share a comment, question, something. Please feel free to do so. It helps when we get some interaction. It's a little bit different presenting virtually than it is in person because we miss some folks when we don't see the little boxes. So please do feel free to share. It really helps when we're collaborating and we can know what's happening in your neck of the woods.
Absolutely. And Sue shared a little bit about Chris and I, and we'll share a little bit more, but we would love to know what you guys are doing and what your role are on the team. I see we have at least one audiologist who is not our captioner, Allison. If you want to share in the chat, are you an O&M specialist? Are you an audiologist? Are you a teacher of the deaf? Are you a TBI? What is it that you are doing? Check those out.
And one more thing to share, if there's something that you came today wanting to learn about, or you had a specific question about a student or someone that you're working with, please do include that in the chat as well. Okay. And our subtitle here, Building Strong Working Relationships as we work to better understand the environmental hearing needs of our students and clients with a dual sensory loss.
Perfect. I've seen some people come through on the chat, some TBI, some dual certified TBI and O&Ms, administrator over both deaf and hard of hearing and VI programs, some comms, social worker, awesome, staffing specialist over both of those programs as well. Perfect. We've got a nice mix today. Thanks everybody for joining us. As Sue mentioned, I'm Kaycee Bennett. I'm Deafblind Education Consultant at TSB-VI, Texas School for the Blind and Visually Impaired, on the Texas Deafblind Project. That's my email address. If you have any questions or follow-up or want to chat about anything, that's where you can find me. And here is Chris's as well.
And just in case, I believe that the PowerPoint or the PDF of the PowerPoint got uploaded to your to the website, so that hopefully all the things that we're reviewing, you don't have to write anything down, just download the PDF, and the links will be there as well as the email addresses. Yeah, great. Okay, so what's the story? All of this really started from an amazing human whose name is Robbie Bleha, and I'm just going to read the slides. Sorry. The real reason that this set of tools came to being was the passion of Robbie Bleha. She wanted to make sure that the students who are deafblind will receive an evaluation and services that meet their unique needs, and she can truly move mountains. So all of this is Robbie's brainchild.
I'm going to spend a little time today talking about hearing. Oftentimes for students who are deaf or hard of hearing or deafblind, we on the hearing side of things hear people say, oh, he can hear me. And that might be true, but there's a really big difference and big designation among the different steps of hearing. So the first one is detection that we're going to talk about. I hear it. I hear something. Oftentimes, you know, there's a noise, which may be you saying a child's name or dropping something, and the child turns and people say, oh, he can hear. He heard that. And he did. He heard something and turned. This is like the basic step here of hearing. And then the next step is discrimination. Knowing that that sound is different, knowing that you said something versus something hitting the floor, knowing what it is that you said versus something else. I know that you said cat and not pat. And these two pieces of that hierarchy are tested often by the clinical audiologist. So they go to the audiologist does hearing testing in a booth and gives you a nice audiogram, and that is showing what sound was detected by that individual. And then the discrimination is in Texas, we have an eligibility form that's often used, and it does ask for that discrimination information. I can click this link and show you what it looks like. It's blank on this form, and it's blank in real life almost all the time. So where it says word discrimination quiet and word discrimination noise toward the bottom, you'll see that it's not filled in. But it is a place for our clinical audiologists to give us that information. And then we can program based on that information.
And Kaycee, did you want to do the banana on the first link? For those that don't know what the banana is?
Sure. Here is an audiogram that was charted onto what we call a speech banana. You can see this banana shape toward the top of this graph, and that is where all the speech sounds, or almost all, F almost fits in there, fit inside this shape. We call it the speech banana. And so we chart red circles are right and blue X's are left, and we chart hearing on these to allow staff who are less familiar with hearing loss to better understand what the student is able to detect. So it's an important piece to understand that that is detection that we're looking at on that.
Thank you.
Absolutely. There we go. And then the next two steps we're going to talk about are identification. I know what that sound is. I know that you said my name. I know that that was a dog barking. I know what that sound is. And then the step following that is comprehension. So I know that you said my name, and that means you want my attention and you want me to turn around and look at you. I know that that was a dog barking, so I should look and make sure that dog is on a leash and not about to attack me, or whatever it is, that the meaning attached to that sound is something that the individual is able to understand and use that sound meaningfully. These two things are not tested by the clinical audiologist. So when the kid goes to the doctor, comes back with their audiogram, their lovely paperwork, this information is not there. However, in schools, we are able to evaluate these things, and the teacher of the deaf and hard of hearing can absolutely write goals and target these areas. And I will show you an example of what that might look like. So I know there's a lot of words on a screen, but I wanted you to have access to the goal and objectives that were written here. This was a goal written for a student that myself, as the teacher of the deaf and hard of hearing, wrote and targeted with collaboration with the orientation mobility specialist. So we were able to see what, through our joint evaluation, what was missing for this student, and then I was able to work on those things in a way that would be meaningful for him. So I'll read the goal really quickly. I won't read all the objectives, but by the end of 36 instructional weeks, when given environmental sounds produced in a quiet environment, the student will use his auditory identification skills to identify what the sound is and be able to explain what information that sound could give him 4 out of 5 opportunities. So, and then the objectives are just breaking that down into the identification and comprehension. So what that looked like was some one-on-one time, pull out time between myself as teacher of the deaf and the student. And we had recorded environmental sounds that the O&M was wanting him to be able to identify and comprehend out in street crossings and in the community and near his home. And we used those actual sounds recorded on our iPhone to practice in a quiet environment without the visual cues. Is the student able to identify these sounds? And then is the student able to explain to me why that's meaningful and what you do with that sound? So it worked out really nicely to be able to work on these things and get him really comfortable in a quiet environment so that he was able to apply that information once he was out with the orientation and mobility specialist. A tool that I love to use to help gather some of this information is the informal functional hearing evaluation, which we refer to as the IFE. And I will take us there. We can look at it really quickly. This is what it looks like. And there's a lot of pieces to it, which, sorry for the scrolling. There's a speech banana. It includes an interview piece, which is really, really helpful. I like to interview a parent or family member, and then also a teacher or an intervener, somebody who is with that student pretty regularly and knows quite a bit about them. You can get some really great information from this interview. And then the other part that's in the IFE here is an observation checklist. And I found that even students who I had worked with for many, many years and felt that I knew really well how they use their functional hearing, there were pieces here that I did not know once I used this checklist. So I found it to be really helpful. And I use this information in writing reports for communication evaluations on their functional hearing. And let's get back over here. So then speaking of, on the report piece, we will not look at this whole gigantic document, but this is an example. You should have this link in your handout of functional vision evaluation that is functional vision evaluation, a communication evaluation, and a learning media assessment all in one. We found that the functional vision evaluations and learning media assessments were really, really helpful to classroom teachers, of course. But if we don't know how the student communicates, none of it really matters. We can't talk about literacy without communication. We can't talk about access without looking at the child holistically when we're talking about a child who is deafblind. So we include this information about the communication all within one document.
Kaycee, can I interrupt you for 1 second? I just wanted to share in the chat. Ruth asked, would you complete an FLE, functional listening eval as well, which might be right where you're at?
Yes, so functional hearing or functional listening evaluation, different people call them different things, but yes, the functional listening or functional hearing evaluation should absolutely be completed as part of the communication evaluation. And the IFE is a great tool for that. There are so many different functional listening or functional hearing evaluations on the market. The IFE I like because it doesn't have to be students who are proficient communicators and can really explain exactly what they hear, where they hear best, and oh, that sound was this kind of sound. And you know, sometimes we have kids with multiple disabilities or kids who are emerging language users, and the IFE is really great for that because it is interview and observation based, which is a little bit different than a lot of the functional listening and functional hearing evals that are out there that require a little more participation from the individual that you're evaluating. So it's just another tool to add to your toolbox, and it is free, which I love. And I'll show you where you can get that when we look at resources in a little bit.
And Kaycee, another IFE question. Who should fill out the IFE? Is the IFE done by one person? Is it done by everybody?
Great question. The IFE, I think in theory could be done by anybody. I think it's really great to have the teacher of the deaf as the lead on the IFE. Of course, if you have a teacher of the deafblind, which I know not everybody does, that's another really great person to have on the lead, to take the lead on using that tool. However, I think the information that we gather from that helps everybody. So it's certainly not something that needs to be done in isolation by the deaf ed team. But typically, because it is looking at functional hearing, the teacher of the deaf is at least involved in that.
Thank you.
Okay, and then after detection, discrimination, identification, and then comprehension, then we can talk about utilization.
And as a comms, that's kind of where we're jumping in, for the most part, what we've learned about using hearing. And so the utilization of environmental sound, we have localization. Where's the sound coming from? Is it moving? Which direction and how quickly? Estimation, how far away is that sound? When will it arrive where I am? And some of these, we'll get into this a little bit, but some of these can be different based on if we have unilateral hearing loss or differences in our ability on either side. There's a question from Jennifer about, can the IFE be done by the comms? And Jennifer, as a comms, I need to, we'll talk about this as we move along. I need to think about how their hearing loss is impacting their ability to travel and interact with their environment safely. And I don't necessarily have to be the lead, but that's the tool is such that anybody could fill it out. It's not written in, you don't need a doctorate in any particular category to fill it out. Let me put it that way. It's meant to be something that members of the team can contribute to. The hope is through all of this that we're looking at collaboration. And so the idea of all of us doing what we do in isolation, we aren't giving the benefit to the student at that point. So it can be done by the comms, but what gives us a much better picture is when everyone is contributing to that tool.
Absolutely. And the I in IFE is informal, which is really nice. So we don't have to go through that whole read process and all of that. It can be done at any time, and doesn't have to be a formal thing, which is great. I'm glad it's new to you, Jennifer. Hopefully you'll find it helpful. I just wanted to add on the localization, something to keep in mind. Chris mentioned unilateral loss, but sometimes localization is not possible for some of our students. And that's something that we have to work closely with the audiologist with to find out, are we trying to target things that this student is not able to do? And could be many, many reasons for that. If a student has unilateral hearing loss or is only aided on one side, if they're wearing cross aids, if, depends on what age, if they're wearing cochlear implants, what age of that they were implanted, how long they've been aided, consistency of use. There's so many factors. So that's certainly something we want to make sure of and keep in mind that everybody is different and students with hearing loss may not be able to do that. And we have to work with our audiologists to find out.
So in terms of utilization of the sound, again, echolocation, we have two different kinds of echolocation. We have passive echolocation, that's just using the ambient sound. I'm just walking through a building and I can sense, so to speak, when those open corridors are there. We also have active echolocation where I am deliberately creating a sound, either from my cane tap or from a tongue click or clapping hands or even from a clicking device to be able to have that sound reflected. They work a little bit differently. Typically, just like a boomerang, when you throw it, it comes back to where it started. If you're using sound that's emanating near your ears, you have a little bit better chance of getting it back toward your head. So the tongue click can be very effective. There's different people who have different feelings about using a tongue click. The cane tap is also effective. One's just a little more directional than the other. In terms of orientation, spatial updating, planning travel, maintaining travel. When we think about especially our travelers who use guide dogs, they're not going to be finding those physical obstacles. They are obstacle avoiders when they're working with a dog. So they especially have to be listening to their environment to know when they're passing significant landmarks to be able to update on their travel where they are along their route. And these are the specialists that are involved. Not every team is going to have all of these members. We've probably all been to IEP meetings where there are very full tables and very sparse tables. Sometimes we're fortunate to be in a district or a school for the blind that has just about every profession you can imagine, but that's not always the case. But often we have the audiologist, both educational and personal. And Kaycee, would you elaborate a little bit on the differences?
Yeah, sure. So it depends on the structure of your school district and who's employed, like Chris said, but oftentimes there will be an educational audiologist who is on staff or is available to that district. Typically that person is doing fitting with FM or DM systems and looking at accommodations that are appropriate for that student in the school setting. Sometimes they're fitting with hearing aids if the school district is using school aids. But typically when students are going and they're getting their cochlear implants mapped, which is what they call like setting up the programs on cochlear implants, or getting their hearing aids and getting their hearing aids programmed, typically that's done by the personal audiologist, which is the clinical audiologist, the doctor that the family is taking the child to. Like I said, there are exceptions to that. Sometimes educational audiologists are doing that, but typically that's the designation. So when we're looking at, does the student need special programs for travel? Does the student need whatever? And we'll kind of get into that in a little bit, but those questions are often for the personal audiologist. So understanding the difference and the roles and understanding from the family what they get from each of those people can be helpful as well.
Thank you, Kaycee. And teacher of the deaf and hard of hearing, lots of these professions can go by different names in different places, just like in the names morph over time, like our TVIs now often are going by TSVI instead of just TVI. So just because we have it written here one way, it might be something different where you are. Speech and language pathologists, SLPs, the teachers of students who are deafblind, TDB, interveners, the orientation mobility specialist, the teacher of students with visual impairment or TVI. And so what's everyone's role in the team? That's a lot of people. Are we all doing the same thing? Are we doing different things? Who do we go to for what? So Kaycee, if you could click on that link. This is one of the documents in the tool. And Kaycee, I don't know if you want to do the tour now or you want to do the tour after. Either way is okay.
Up to you. We can dive in a little bit, I guess, but on the right hand side of this menu, you'll see where it says about sound travels, and there are 6 bullet points here, and those are all documents within this big thing we're calling sound travels. So Chris, you want the delineation of roles one open?
We're actually on it right now, I think. So if we just scroll down a little bit, this is just this particular page just lists the different professions, and we'll just go through a few of them. You can download this packet, the entire packet of the tools that we're going to talk about as a PDF, or you can visit on the website. Sometimes the presentation is a little bit different in the PDF than it is on the website, but same content. So Kaycee, if you could scroll back to audiologist real quick. So the bullet points here: providing training with personal amplification device of the student to the teacher of the deaf and hard of hearing, providing audiological evaluation and results of the evaluation to the educational team, collaborate with the O&M specialist, the TDHH, the family and education team members, selecting and programming appropriate personal amplification device, and on it goes. If I'm a mobility specialist, I may not know anything about the hearing aid. I may not know if the hearing aid is on. And so I need to know, who do I go to ask? I may not see the audiologist ever. For many orientation mobility specialists and teachers of the visually impaired, they may like to go to the low vision evaluation, but they may never have considered going to an audiological evaluation. They're both helpful, but sometimes we travel like a big herd, and it can be kind of challenging to have 8 of us show up at an evaluation. So sometimes I just need to know who would typically be there so that I can ask for information, or to ask them to bring information to the audiologist during the evaluation. Just as an example, the audiologist may not be considering that this person, young person or older person, I'm just going to say learner, that this learner might be out crossing streets. And so I need to kind of think in terms of who the players are on the team. So we've got the comms, talking about what the comms is doing, how the comms is supporting others. So the second bullet under comms, communicate specific uses of environmental sounds to the audiologist, the teacher of the deaf and hard of hearing, and other members of the educational team. They won't be thinking about using near lane parallel traffic. That's something that the comms will need to help educate the other members on the team on, just as they are educated about the amplification devices that the learner is using. And it goes through each category, intervener, families, just to give you some ideas of what would those roles be. There is no set in stone. These are just suggestions. Every team's going to be different because our roles overlap, but we need to know kind of who that main source of information is where we can find those things out. Kaycee, did you have anything to add on that?
I don't think so. I know we'll get into some of those collaboration tools, and I think that'll help show what that can look like on working together.
So we talked a little bit on that page about collaboration from all team members. We're also addressing the expanded core curriculum for visual and auditory areas. This is all sensory efficiency. And so just like the IFE and other areas, environmental sounds, these are all different ways that we are addressing at least a couple of those areas of the expanded core curriculum.
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of people, or most people, know that there's an expanded core curriculum for students who are visually impaired. But many people don't know that there is an expanded core curriculum for students who are deaf and hard of hearing. There's two to choose from. There's one out of Iowa and one out of APSIA, Atlantic provinces. And they are fabulous and very helpful. And we actually have one that'll be published this coming August. Hopefully we'll be done in time in our new Essential Tools of the Trade book. That'll be an ECC for students who are deafblind.
And I believe when we get to the Livebinder links toward the end of the presentation, at least one of them is included to give you an idea of what's different for an auditory expanded core curriculum than it would be for a visual. And students who are deafblind or who have dual sensory loss need both.
Definitely need both. And then, Chris briefly mentioned there's things that we're doing that, that O&Ms, that you guys as O&Ms are doing that audiologists have no idea about, and vice versa. And so we have these quotes in here to kind of bring that message home. This is something written by an audiologist on this topic. It says, we need to consider the mic directionality and the effects of noise reduction and suppression, and how these effects might be exacerbated by the lack of ear mold venting. This is especially true for clients with devices employing compression with binaural amplification and or using multiple programs. Of course, another consideration is the potential use of the FM plus mic setting. So you're not meant to understand every word of this. It's just the point of all of this affects what you're doing with travel and sound and how the student's using sound, yet it's written in Dr. Gibberish. And so we have to work together to make sure that all of this makes sense and is usable information. And you guys do it too.
That delineation of roles document hopefully can guide you in when you hear something like that and it doesn't make sense, who do you go to ask? And the same is true for our O&M speak. So for those that are not familiar with O&M, traveling with the parallel traffic surge using auditory alignment strategies when crossing a multi-phase intersection in a metropolitan area with fully actuated signals that are equipped with vibrotactile APS, it may sound very confusing for an audiologist to understand what we're saying. Sometimes we use the exact same words and they have totally different meanings.
Okay, where to begin? So we looked at the IFE, which is the second bullet point here. Another tool that I want to show you is the IEP Quality Indicators for students who are deafblind. I'm going to click this link and we'll look at it. It includes 10 content areas. And those areas are listed here: access to information, social issues, communication, calendar system, behavior, O&M, related and supplemental services, transition planning, and teaming. And it goes through, we're going to look more in depth at the O&M quality indicators in a moment, but we'll scroll down and kind of show you what it looks like here. So
Kaycee, if you're able to do that Command plus just to make that a little bit bigger on the screen, it's pretty tiny. Thank you.
Absolutely. So we've got kind of an overall thing to think about. And then there are pieces broken down to make sure that we have considered these things and that we have documented them in the student's IEP so that we can have the highest quality IEP possible for a student who's deafblind. So we've got all these 10 different sections, and they all have multiple things underneath them to consider. And like I said, we'll look more in depth at the O&M ones in a bit, but this is a really great tool. It does take some time. It's not a really quick tool to use. However, I find that it is worth the time to make sure that you are sitting down and making sure all the great things that your team are doing for that student are documented. We never know when students may up and move. We want to make sure that all the programming, everything we have figured out that works for that student is written down in that IEP. The other tool that's here is another one of the sound travels tools, and it is the Audiology and Orientation Mobility Collaboration tool. This is probably my favorite piece of the whole thing. And it's looking at, let me try to zoom back in on this one too. All the different pieces that we're doing in our silos and don't know each other's doing. And this first one, as an example, says using sounds from the environment for maintaining orientation, like the compressor on the drinking fountain, a vending machine, a dishwasher, fans. Audiologists want to get rid of all of that sound. The main goal is to have the students be able to have access to speech and not all of that stuff. We don't want to hear the drinking fountain. We don't want to hear the dishwasher. However, those things might be important for that student's travel. And I can guarantee you those clinical audiologists have not thought of that for these students with visual impairments. So this is a really great tool. When you open the PDF, it makes like a nice little chart. Where on the right, you can write down specific notes about that student's needs. So it's not so general as just saying he might need the water fountain. You can write down these are the things that this student is needing access to so that the audiologist has that information when they're programming those hearing aids or cochlear implants or whatever the student may be wearing. Sorry if you can hear my child screaming in the background.
And as the orientation mobility specialist, you can use this tool. Let's say you cannot be at the evaluation or you don't have direct contact with the audiologist. This is a tool that you can help them to begin to understand what you anticipate being needs for that particular learner at that age, so that they can begin to understand what they need to hear.
Absolutely. And there's a ton on here, including traffic considerations. And again, these are things as O&Ms y'all think about all the time, but as audiologists, usually those are just sounds we're trying to get rid of in the hearing world. So it's a really, really great tool to have those conversations, whether they be actual conversations or some paperwork that you can send with the family when they go see their personal audiologist.
Okay, and there's more. We're going to jump back into some of the tools, and maybe, Kaycee, since we keep jumping back to it, maybe before we address each of these 3 tools, we could do a little tour of the site.
Sure. Let me click one of these, should take us there. So on this right-hand menu, we're under orientation and mobility right now, if you just come to our site. And on this orientation and mobility right-hand menu, there's some general orientation and mobility things up top, and then we have about sound travels. And all of the sound travels documents that we are looking at today are over here in this right-hand menu. We just looked at the collaboration, no, we just looked at the, yes, collaboration tool. We have all these other things that we're going to be going through as we go, and you can download them, as Chris mentioned, or you can view them here on the website if you're just wanting to read what's here. And when you go to the bottom, it will have a little button that will take you to the next one so that you can go through and read these tools, and then they have the download form buttons so that you can download each one if you would like. And they're all free on our website. Is there one that you want me to go to specifically, Chris?
No, I thought you would just give folks a little idea of what the Texas Deafblind Project website is while we were here, since it's much more than just the sound travels.
Sure, we can do that. Absolutely. So I'll go to the homepage. We are on the Texas Deafblind Project website, which is txdeafblindproject.org. And we have tons of information on this website. So under home, you can read about us and our project and what we do and how we're funded and all that fun stuff. But the things that you guys are going to want to see, one of my favorite pages is under products. And you can see there's lots of products here. There's articles, things that our team has made, online courses, podcasts, recordings from our symposiums, all kinds of stuff here. I think one of the most helpful pages is this books, publications, and newsletters. And all of our books, publications, and newsletters are here. And so we've got the Atom LS, which is a really phenomenal tool to evaluate modifications or adaptations that might need to happen to manual language, like sign language, for students who have visual impairments. We've got the Calendars book written by Robbie Blaha, this communication book by Linda Haygood, determining the need for an intervener in educational settings, which just got an update in August. So if you're familiar with that and haven't looked at it in a little bit, come back and check it out again. A new tool we have is the guidance for planning behavior intervention for children and youth who are deafblind or have visual and multiple impairments. IEP checklist for proficient communicators. This is where you can find that IEP quality indicators that we looked at really quickly a moment ago. The IFE also lives here. And then our sex ed document is here that Robbie wrote along with Kate Mosshurst. So that is the, again, products and then books, publications, and newsletters page. We have a whole section on behavioral supports that really centers around that new document, the guidance for planning behavior intervention document, which is really fabulous, also free. We have an deafblind interaction microsite. You can go here and then enter into a microsite and read more about some deafblind interaction strategies. We've got the orientation and mobility page, which we were just looking at, that has general orientation and mobility stuff, as well as the sound travels pieces that we're looking at today. If you're curious about TDBs, teachers of students who are deafblind, we have a whole little site about that, and you can use the right-hand menu to learn more about why we need them, what they are, how to become one, all of that fun stuff. Another really helpful page is under resources. We've got lots of resources here. Many of these Livebinders under Livebinders are Chris's and O&M related. And then we also have topical resources, and I think this is one of the best parts of our website. They're broken out by topic. The topics are alphabetized. We've got assessment tools. If you're looking for an assessment tool for an individual who's deafblind, this is the place to look. There's a bunch here. And the IFE is included in that, and it is here. Early childhood topics. Our early childhood deafblind specialist curated this little collection here. We've got educational considerations, which includes the IEP quality indicators that we talked about. Family engagement, and our family engagement coordinator shows the things that are here. IEP development tools. Quality indicators is there as well. And proficient communicators, qualified personnel, which includes some information about TDBs, TVIs, teachers of the deaf, orientation mobility specialists, but also about interveners. So if you're interested in learning more about that, you can find that there. We've got a section on tactile learning and tactile language, which majority of this information, if not all of it, is coming out of the Nordic Welfare Center, which is phenomenal. If you're not familiar with that, come check that out. And transition planning in Texas, and our transition specialist who specializes in deafblind transition put this list together. So spend some time going through that. And then under instructional strategies, this is still in development, but we've got a bunch of stuff here if you want to learn more about calendars or routines, choice making. We've got lots of things here. We also have video examples, which can be helpful as you're learning new things, to see videos about how it works. Now I'm going to see if I can get back.
And then I think the 2 pages we were going to look at here in Sound Travels were the environmental sound considerations and developing auditory skills. So this again is just to help both parties, the audiologist and the O&M, for each area that Kaycee described before, for instance, discrimination, the perspective or perception of each profession. So in discrimination, it says the audiologist considerations, this will likely require less compression of sound in order to discern differences. Sounds like idling and accelerating cars, or comparing echo sounds in a quiet environment. And for the O&M, when hearing aids are used, all sounds get louder, and often there is a peak level at which loud sounds are cut off to prevent really loud sounds being relayed to the wearer. Often these sounds are needed to discern something like a city bus from a car. So hopefully there's areas in this environmental sound considerations to help both sets of professions to understand what that particular wearer is going to experience and why they're important. So I don't know much about compression, but by going through this, I may begin to understand how that's going to impact a person's ability to relate to their environment, where an audiologist may not understand that I need to hear the difference, not just to know that the car is there, but I need to hear it accelerating to know when I've got that surge. So again, just a tool to help everyone to be on the same page for what this individual learner or traveler needs in order to be safe and as independent as possible in the community.
Absolutely.
And then our developing auditory skills.
Right.
This is not an A to Z kind of a reference. It's just a starting point to begin to think about how we can help our learners develop the use of sound. So just some examples here. Sound effects can be downloaded to begin to pay attention to the sound. So it's not just footsteps, but are they wearing, can we hear if they're wearing dress shoes or are they wearing flip-flops? Can we tell the difference between the airplanes and the lawnmowers or the helicopters? What are those emergency vehicle sounds and what do they represent? Lots of different things here that we can begin to do, even if they're indoors during a rainy day. For our young learners, we can begin to help them to develop those auditory concepts that they're going to use throughout their life. And then finally, there's a sample letter to an audiologist. This is just something an audiologist helped us to prepare. It helps to kind of introduce, because the reality is that most people beyond education, there are some in the rehab world that do know, but many, we don't show up on their radar. They don't know about us. Many times people will just default to an occupational therapist thinking that they're the ones that are going to help make some of those transitions happen. So a little bit of introduction to the audiologist about what an O&M is, understanding that for the most part, the audiologist is working with individuals who have hearing loss, and it's much less common for them to be working with dual sensory loss. This is just a way of introducing yourself to hopefully allow them to know what role you're playing and what information you need. And then we got some more resources. We talked a little bit about Livebinders. And if you're not familiar with Livebinders, it's just it's storage in the cloud. Kind of like Dropbox, you don't need to have an account. You can create a free account. And if you want some extra bells and whistles, you can create a paid account. I think they even have an educator discount. The benefit of having this binder is that you can share it with anyone. You can make a binder that's student specific and share it with your team so that the paraprofessional, the parent, every member of the team is able to access the same information. I think that they call it Livebinders because the tools that are linked, such as web pages, instead of it being static for when you added it, it stays connected to that actual site so that anytime the page gets updated, the binder is also automatically updated. So maybe we could look at Susie's real quick. Susie Tiggs has now transitioned into, I think, coordinating services in the state of Maine, but she's prolific in making binders that were when we went into COVID and everybody had to do remote, oh my goodness, those numbers just took off beyond the charts. And so this particular binder is O&M services for students with deafblindness by Susie. Lots of resources here. These again are free. You can go and check them out at any point. You can share them with parents, with team members, lots and lots of things that are helpful for just understanding our students who are deafblind.
There's yours.
And so this is just a repeat of what I think we're going to get to in the next one. The way that the Livebinders work is the tabs are either set off to the side, in this case on the left side, or across the top. By clicking the tab, it opens up whatever's in that section. And if things don't come up when you do that, there's a URL toward the top. And all you have to do is click the URL and it opens another web page, which takes you to it. And so sometimes there's things that happen where you have an HTTP page or an HTTPS page, and there's some interaction that makes things challenging. Just click the link and it'll take you right to whatever is being referenced. And so this particular binder has lots of resources that we've talked about with Sound Travels. If you could click on the team resources real quick for a second. And we've talked about the IFE already. But there's some other resources here, such as if you click the Home Talk and Family Assessment, these again are tools that are free that you can download, you can print. There's also a Spanish version, just lots of resources that people have made available. And hopefully these binders are just, without having to go through Google to get 12 billion hits, hopefully they're one spot for you so that you can find them, so that hopefully you have tools that you can either use yourself or that you can share. And then other websites for information, for resources, we have NCDB, the National Center on Deafblindness. And if you'll click that one, just in case nobody's been there. And so there's lots and lots of information at NCDB. There's things for technical assistance. If you work in outreach, there's resources that families can use, you as a professional. Just another wonderful clearinghouse of information related to deafblindness, dual sensory loss. And there's some videos. I'm trying not to name names, but it's wonderful to see young people who you might have a connection with, such as those that are often showing up in Paths to Literacy or other places. Yeah. And then TSB-VI that's just a link to our website. There are some specific things for deafblindness within our outreach tab. We have the Deafblind Project, which includes the Deafblind Project website, but also includes some family engagement and other resources. And Perkins School for the Blind is another terrific resource for information. And for lots of these places, you can just type in hearing loss, deafblind, and get resources, whether they're webinars or text documents that you can download and print. Lots of different tools that are available.
Other things that might be helpful to you are some different apps. There are decibel recording apps. And whenever Christmas last year, I got an Apple Watch for the first time and realized that my watch can tell me how loud it is around me in different places. So if you are someone who isn't really familiar with the measurement of decibels and knowing what that really means, when you're looking at a student's audiogram, you may not really know what that means in reference to how loud things need to be for them to be able to detect it. And that can be a tool for you to kind of play with and figure out, oh, that sound didn't even come close to where I know where they can even detect it. So I know they wouldn't be able to comprehend it. Just kind of playing with that. There's audiological screening apps, which I cannot stress enough does not replace going to the audiologist and getting an evaluation. But it can, again, help just kind of show a general idea of what the student is able to detect and what they are not. sometimes it can take months to get into an audiologist. And so that can be a nice little in between while we're waiting tool to help us have some kind of idea. And then recordings of environmental sounds for auditory training. I talked about that a little bit in that goal writing piece, where we could use YouTube and use videos off the internet, use apps of, you know, fire truck sounds and whatever sounds from the cars passing sounds. But you can also record in the student's community, in the student's environment, and use those sounds that the student will actually come in contact with.
And just as we have students, if we're just thinking of exclusively vision loss, for some students, it's difficult for them to understand what other people who have a typical visual development are seeing that they're not seeing. These tools can be excellent ways to help our learners to understand what they may not be hearing that their peers or family members are hearing. So in terms of listening for when is it loud, that's kind of a subjective term, what is loud, but when you're using those decibel recording apps, now we can get pretty objective and specific about how loud is it when we're in a car, how loud is it when we're standing at the intersection, how loud is it when we're in the gymnasium, those types of things. And the audiological screening apps, as Kaycee mentioned, it doesn't do what the audiologist does. It's just scratching the surface maybe. But sometimes we need to kind of quote unquote sell somebody on being willing to go to an audiological evaluation. If as an O&M you notice that somebody can pick up a car coming from their left side in 5 seconds away from where they're at, and on the right side they can do it 10 seconds away, now we might have something to be able to encourage them to demonstrate what's happening, why maybe they're noticing that they hear better out of one side or another. And it's just another good selling point to encourage them to actually go through with visiting an audiologist to have an audiological evaluation. Okay, quality indicators. This is diving into the document that Kaycee showed us before. This is not federal law. This is just something that we have in Texas to help ensure that students get what they need. And these are the specific sections related to O&M. So I'm just going to read each of these. Students with deaf blindness get less information from the environment and have lower reinforcement to explore. Deaf blindness affects the identification and use of sound cues. Get the next one. And then it has an area. Oh, go ahead, Kaycee.
I was just going to say, this is what it looks like under each one. We kind of glanced at that in one of the other sections earlier, but it gives you a, yes, we have that documented, no, we don't, or it doesn't apply to that student.
So it's nothing that challenging. They're just simple responses with a bubble for yes, no, and not applicable. So here's a couple of others from 7.1. And again, these are the things that as an O&M, I need to be looking at, I need to be considering in my report. I need to consider the impact of the hearing loss. So 7.1, the student's level of exploration and movement is evaluated in light of the effects of deaf blindness. And 7.2, O&M evaluation and programming reflects the effects of hearing loss on the student's ability to localize and identify sound cues. I really need to make sure that when I'm doing my evaluation, writing my PLAF, looking at the goals and objectives, that these are being considered when I'm planning out how to help that student to develop their skills. And 7.3, the IEP reflects a plan for the comms. In Texas, you are required to be a certified orientation mobility specialist at comms in order to work with school-age children. That's why that one's specified here. To receive support from the team, i.e. support from an interpreter, intervener, or teacher of students who are deafblind in utilizing the student's communication system during instruction. There's lots of things to consider. When I'm standing at a corner with a learner, I need to think about where I'm going to have that student stand. Are they going to be having their FM device on or off? If there's an interpreter or an intervener, where are they going to be standing? And I need to have some of those conversations ahead of time. Kaycee, can you share a little bit of your personal experience with that?
Yes, definitely. As the teacher of students who are deafblind, went on lots of orientation mobility lessons, and how that actually started, just a quick side note, I had never even heard of orientation mobility before as a teacher of the deaf and hard of hearing. And as an itinerant, they gave me a closet to work in, and I shared a closet with the orientation mobility specialist. And so started to kind of learn what she did. And I ended up going on a lesson just by chance one time, because the district that we were working for at the time required that 2 adults be with the student when they were off campus, and her second adult fell through. And so she said, "Do you have time? Can you come so that we can do this lesson?" And I said, "Sure, I'll come." And I went, and it was for a student who was deafblind, a shared student. And I immediately was like, "Oh my gosh, I need to be at as many of these as possible." So much great stuff going on. And so many places that I was able to support. And one of those was this piece, that plan piece. When should you be using the FM, and when is it not appropriate to use the FM? But also, if the student is a speech reader, where are you going to stand as the orientation mobility specialist so the student has access? Where's the light? Where are you? How close are you? Where are you facing? Are you able to retrieve that student safely? Myself as providing information or clarification, communication to the student. Where do I need to be? Because I don't know orientation or mobility. I don't know what's safe and not safe for where I should be standing. So all of that shouldn't be decided on the street corner, probably. Have those conversations ahead of time, like Chris said, around the table, make a plan so that when we get out there, we're not fumbling around trying to figure that piece of it out, especially if you have interpreters or interveners coming for those lessons, because they probably are really unfamiliar with a type of thing like working on street crossing with students. So certainly important to make sure everybody's comfortable and knows their role in those situations.
Thank you, Kaycee. And so 7.4, instruction as reflected in the IEP provides adequate information for the student to establish a destination and recognize a particular route, use of communication system to establish a destination, use of calendar conversation, additional time to explore the salient parts of the route. I'm going to go way off our intended path here. There are some times where as comms we think, oh, well, that student can't do X, Y, or Z because they don't have X, Y, or Z. Students with multiple disabilities, students who aren't communicating. And so this brings us back to just the concept of everybody's eligible, everybody can learn. We just have to set up the stage or set the environment for that learning to occur. So when Kaycee was reviewing the Texas Deafblind Project website, one of those drop downs included things about calendar systems and routines, communication that can happen. And so we're not always steeped in that type of learning as mobility specialists, but it's so extraordinarily helpful to be able to have those systems in place. Because just as an example, if I have a student who's nonverbal, who might be pre-formal language, I could hand them the chain from the swing, or the part of the drinking fountain where the water comes out, the bubbler, and because they love water, now I'm giving them a choice and they can actually choose their route. But it's my role as the mobility specialist, I have to present it in such a way that they can have that conversation, which might not be the traditional way of conversing. And so it's important for me to consider those things in order to allow that person to make a choice, travel a route, use tactile landmarks, or whatever it is that they can connect with in their environment.
The next one, 7.5, is instruction as reflected in the IEP provides supplemental information about the environment to offset the lack of incidental learning. The examples here are what is a mall or what is a bus, by experiential teaching concepts and related vocabulary. This was a super exciting piece to O&M that I didn't know existed. This is like what the teachers of the deaf do. This filling in the gaps, the incidental learning, things that are missed, being there to figure out what it is that you're doing and put that into instruction. The classroom teachers, especially like special ed, like life skills type classrooms, if you've got students in those classes, it's so great to take your O&M plans and help them with that thematic units. You know, if you're going to be going on a bus in a few weeks and the teacher knows that, they could do a whole bus unit with the whole class in the weeks prior to get the student ready and teach them the concepts that they may be missing from that lack of incidental learning. So another really great place for collaboration. The next one is in the next section. So section 7 was orientation mobility. Section 8 is related and supplemental services. And that overarching topic says the effects of deafblindness should be taken into account in assessments, evaluations, and delivery of all related services provided to the student. For example, optimal positioning for communication, etc. And then we jump down to 8.2, and that one says, oh, sorry, Chris, that one.
Okay, go ahead.
That an orientation and mobility evaluation that addresses the effects of hearing loss in combination with the vision impairment in determining the need for services, and then refers back to that section 7.
So again, thinking about the basic structure of our O&M evaluations, and we have our sections for concept development, use of vision. In cases where we have known or suspected hearing loss, we need to really flesh these areas out to evaluate the hearing loss, to be able to include information from our connected professions, such as the audiological report, the other tools like the IFE, to be able to begin to look at how that hearing loss impacts that student's or that learner's ability to connect with their environment, because those things that we can develop now will carry with them into adulthood so that they have that for independent travel as adults. And we've already done some of these resources. So Kaycee took us on a walk through the project website. And again, all of these things are meant to be downloaded, shared. In addition to the things that Kaycee went through, there's also lots of videos on the coffee hour. We've been very fortunate that Kaycee and Kate have been able to host many different speakers that have information related to dual sensory loss. And so lots of resources that are available by just doing a little bit of searching. Sound Travels is downloadable as the PDF, or you can do it in separate sections. We looked a little bit at the Livebinder that's specific for students who are deafblind, and it's got just a load of resources in there. One of the other sections that's in there is that there are, Kaycee, if you could click that link real quick, just to.
Bottom one here.
Yep, thank you. Thank you for navigating.
Sure.
So there's two sections. One is students who are deafblind in functional level programs. And when you open that one up, there are students who are at a more functional developmental level. So we've got things like the last one that we can see there is Development Through Relationships by Jan van Dijk. And so lots and lots of things. There's information about routines and using calendars. This isn't going to be necessarily anyway appropriate for our academic students, but for many students, they're at that level where we need to be using hand under hand, introducing tactile symbols, lots of different things that aren't going to show up in our academic learners. So that second one is for students who are accessing the general curriculum. This is our future presidents. When we think about how their world is different, we have lots of things to consider here that aren't even going to be touched by those who are just at the functional level. So we've got things like their crossing cards for street crossings. We've got things like the Leader Dogs for the Blind program, where they train dogs who are dual purpose, I'm going to say. I'm sure there's much better names for it. There's also information for those with Usher syndrome who have just things to consider moving into adulthood, how we're interacting with those in the world. For many times, people feel that the biggest disability or the biggest handicap, however you want to say that, is not the sensory loss, but the world around them, the way that other people perceive them and how they interact with them. So it's important that you, as the orientation mobility specialist, other members of the team, are able to address those things that are going to happen in their life. There's wonderful stories like somebody who can take the New York subway totally independently. Her challenge comes when people see that she they think she needs help and they divert her from her path. And so it's not that she could, if everybody else stayed asleep for the day, she'd do just fine. But when people start trying to interact with her, that's where she has the challenges. So just some different resources that are available. And then there's some videos that are student specific, so that if you are just beginning to work with a dual sensory loss learner, there might be some things there that are helpful. Okay. And then, I don't know, Kaycee, you want to take this one?
Sure. So these are some resources that we put together at the beginning of the pandemic, when everybody was trying to figure out what on earth we were going to do about this whole virtual learning thing. And we know as this kind of ebbs and flows, we are finding sometimes us back into these situations. And so we have this included here. There are some coaching modules that are in Matrix, which is what our Texas Sensory Support Network uses for their place to house information. And they have some modules on how to do coaching with families and with staff. And so those are here. Those are free modules that you can take. There's a coaching Livebinder. We looked at Livebinder with Chris earlier. Susie has one on coaching parents and teachers. As you can see from all of those purple at the top of this page, there's a ton here about using the coaching method with families, which early childhood's done for a really long time, but also with staff, as we're not able to actually be in these classrooms and be with these teachers. We've got Chris Tabb did a podcast. You want to talk about your podcast?
You know, everybody's in a different place. Some people are still continuing with remote. Who knows if we'll have to go back under remote, but that was done at a time where we didn't have a choice, that everybody's schools were closed. So if you're still looking for resources, there's also a Livebinder that is just about remote instruction for orientation mobility. And there's some things in there about role release that you might find very helpful as well, just because we're spread pretty thin these days.
For sure. And if you're not familiar with the podcast in general, we have a podcast called A Sense of Texas that our superintendent, Emily Coleman, does. It is a free podcast that you can access through Podbean, and you can find that on our website. And so Chris did one on that topic of O&M at a distance. But there are also lots and lots and lots of other topics that Emily has either covered herself or brought in guest speakers for. So another great place to gather information. And that is it for slides. We would love to answer any questions that you might have, or talk about anything else that we did not cover today that you were hoping that we would. You can either put anything in the chat, or if you'd like to come off mute, you can do that as well.
And I'm going to put something in the chat. If you all are able to, it's just a favor to ask. We get audited by our state legislature to see why we exist. And the way that they audit us is to look at reviews to see if we are serving any purposes. So there's a link there for a online form. Please do be honest. If you liked it, you didn't. I don't even remember the questions that are on there. There's just a few questions. Basically, it just helps to demonstrate that we're doing something. There's one question that asks what region you're in. I think you can just put region 0 because this is not being delivered in Texas, but somehow they still use those numbers to demonstrate that we're doing something.
And I'm putting Chris and I's emails in the chat again. So if you have questions you think of later and would like to reach out to either of us or both of us, you can do that at our emails in the chat. It's our last name, first initial at tsvvi.edu.
And I'm going to do a quick little survey if I can. How many of you at the moment are working with students or adults who are deafblind, who have dual sensory loss, just to get a sense of what's happening? Okay, looks like we got a hand up from Ruth. Anybody else? You can put it in the chat or open your mic. Okay, we got another yes. Go ahead. A lot of times you may be working with a student and you don't know that they're deafblind. There are some families who opt out of having the label of deafblind for a variety of reasons. And so sometimes you might notice that there's an auditory loss and a vision loss, and technically that is deafblind, but sometimes families aren't comfortable with that. Kaycee, would you share a little bit about Deaf Plus?
Yeah, so there are a whole group of individuals who are deaf and have additional disabilities. It's kind of the equivalent of the, well, people call it MIVI on the deaf side of things. And certainly we see students who aren't always identified as visually impaired, but may have CVI, may have other things going on. And because of those additional disabilities, sometimes it can be hard to tell. Jennifer added in the chat, adults losing hearing, or even students who might be losing hearing and they don't know how to interpret their environment. Absolutely. And we see, students who have progressive vision loss or hearing loss or both that end up either middle school, high school, or sometimes that they're not identified with those disorders until they have left us in the school system and become adults. So sometimes we served them and didn't know that they had dual sensory impairments when they were school-aged children.
And sometimes we think of just adding one disability to another. The difference with a dual sensory loss is that typically when our vision drops, we rely more on our hearing. We get better at using it. It compensates for the loss in vision. Or if we have hearing loss, we get really good at using our vision and it compensates for the hearing loss. So instead of it just being deaf plus blindness or deaf plus low vision, it's more of a multiplication. It's a synergistic effect that makes it even more profound to have that dual sensory loss, because one system cannot compensate for the other.
And that's a really great reason for IEP committees to consider deafblind as an eligibility for those students who might even just have mild losses of both or one or the other, because it really does have that multiplicative effect on everything when those both distal senses are affected.
And Ruth, I'm not sure if you have your hand up to share or if you have a.
Yes, I do. I wanted to make a comment. Usually our kiddos that are deafblind, what I've encountered is that parents have a really, really hard time getting that audiogram piece done. So our booth is at a specific school. So sometimes when the parents can't come where they need to go because they don't have transportation, because they're low income themselves or whatever the situation may be, usually our deaf plus or our blind plus kiddos find that we have an audiologist on staff. She was on, but she had to go. But what we do is that we have a portable audiometer and we go out to the school and we get the audiogram done at the school. I mean, those are not the best and reliable audiograms, but it gives us something to rely on and for the teachers to know what kind of hearing loss they have, so that it can put a better perspective and we can write a better IEP for the team. But, little things like that can help, because the screenings are nothing.
Yes. And sometimes we just have to get creative, like you're saying. We have to bring stuff to them. We got to get what we can get. Sometimes we make them O&M lessons because we have permission to take these kids in the community. Well, guess what? Today is the community is the audiologist, or it's the school that has the booth, or whatever it may be, to get the information we need to serve these kids in whatever way that looks like. Creativity is is key sometimes in these situations.
Indeed.
And I love this information shared. NCDB, this NCDB list that came out of, it's a risk list of combined vision and hearing loss for infants and toddlers, we're certainly trying to find these babies younger and younger. And so that list can certainly be helpful. Thanks so much for sharing that. And I'm glad the Florida Deafblind Project shared it with you guys.
And Kaycee, maybe you could talk a little bit, while we have a couple of minutes, about the differences between the expanded core curriculum for those who are deaf and hard of hearing compared to those who are visually impaired.
Yeah,
I know there's some overlap, but yeah.
They do, and actually, I'll pull up the APSIA one because it's my favorite one, and we can look at it really quickly. It has some really great areas, and like you said, there are some that overlapping areas for sure. We've got audiology, listening skills development, communication development, speech reading development, theory of mind, self-determination and advocacy, obviously overlapping there, social emotional skills, career ed, family ed, and of course they've got their references. So it's got those different sections, some of which are hearing loss specific, and some that are similar or same categories as VI, but have more hearing loss specific things underneath. And we do have, like I said, the deafblind ECC, which is to be used in addition to VI and deaf and hard of hearing ECC. So that third ECC to use that'll be coming out soon. And it does just kind of look at what are the gaps that are missing, but when we look at both of these tools. So this one in Texas, our ECC for VI is mandated that it has to be used. That's not the case for the deaf and hard of hearing one. However, we encourage districts to use this really great tool because it is talking about really important skills that our students need that they're not going to get in math and science and social studies, like understanding their hearing loss and being able to advocate for themselves, understanding how to use their hearing assistive technology. All of these areas, and it does have early emerging, intermediate, and advanced skills within each of these sections, which I really like. So this is APSIA's Atlantic Provinces special education. I don't know.
They've got great stuff that comes out of APSIA.
I was trying to think of what the acronym is. Atlantic Provinces Special Education Authority, SBA. And they have some really great stuff. And then it's based on the Iowa expanded core curriculum, which is also really great if you want to check that one out as well.
I put the APSIA link in the chat.
Perfect.
Anybody have any other questions or things to share? Okay, well, thank you for letting us share today.
Fantastic. Thank you, Chris and Kaycee. This was, to say informational or informative would be an understatement. So lots of comments about all the resources. Everyone's very, very grateful to have. It's definitely a one-stop shop. So like you said, you don't have to go do 500 Google searches. You've got the Livebinder and just so many more resources that you included in your PowerPoint. So remember, everyone, that handout, that PowerPoint that they use is on our website under events, and look for the title of this virtual water cooler to find that. And then we'll be posting the recording under past events. But again, I just can't thank you both enough for just all your knowledge and experience and stories. Really,
thanks for letting us share today. Thank you.
Really helpful.
Having us too.
Thank you, everyone.
And yeah, I got lots of, this was incredible. Thank you. Thank you so much. Amazing info. Lots of thank yous and appreciation. Wonderful. So then I'm now going to let everyone know, go through our closing code and how you can get your in-service points. All right, so Andrea is on top of it. Our closing code is evaluate, and she put that in the text in the chat box. Closing code evaluate. For our evaluations, we have 4 questions for the Florida Department of Education that we'd like you to respond to. The survey is on our events page, and it's also at bit.ly So bit.ly/FIMC-EVAL, or you can use the QR code that's on the screen. And Andrea put our bit.ly code in the chat box as well. So there are many, many places for you to complete our survey and give feedback for our evaluations. So that's really helpful. That just helps us with our planning purposes to let the DOE know how helpful and meaningful our workshops are. Okay, and for in-service credits, closing code is evaluate. I'm going to complete the survey on our FIMC-VI website, FIMC-VI.org/events with a plural events, S at the end, or bit.ly, bit.ly/FIMC-CEUS. So you can, or you can use a QR code that's on the screen. When you go to our events website, the in-service link, it's embedded in that top paragraph. So when you go on there, don't immediately just start scrolling down and looking for some huge in-service. You just have to read and look for the link for that. Okay, and we're going to start or stop the recording, and so folks can stick around. We can have a discussion, ask questions, share out your stories. That would be really wonderful to hear. Yeah. Oh, and then stay in touch with us. Right now we're at 4210 West Bay Villa Avenue in Tampa, 33611. We have a toll-free number, 800-282-9139. Our local number is 813-837-7826. If you want to sign up for our mailing list, there's a sign up form at the bottom of our forms page, which you can also access from our website, FIMCVI.org. We are on Facebook, FIMCV-VI, Twitter, YouTube, and we have our Canvas site. So you can sign up for our Canvas site as well from our forms page. We'd love to hear from you. If you have any questions or need any resources throughout the year.